Welcome everybody on Zoom. Welcome everybody in the lecture hall. Today we are going to continue our exploration of syntax, namely XML and JSON mainly. Today we'll also take a lot of time to answer any questions you might have. Oh, the sound wasn't working. All right, it's working now. So we are going to take the time to answer all the questions you might have. Because there can be a lot of to digest. I will finish on XML namespaces to make sure that you understood everything. I will also start with a few questions as usual to test your previous knowledge. And that's pretty much it for today. So let's go with it. All right. So let me ask you, this one maybe to start with. So what is the difference between XML and XML 1.0 and XML 1.1? Is it very little, except for a few changes related to Unicode characters and end of lines? Is it namespaces? Is it constraints such as allowing multiple top-level elements? Or is it that 1.0 only supported ASCII characters and 1.1 allows them beyond the 8th line? By the way, I realized there was a message on the chat that I didn't send the email, right? With the do you have access to eDots if you want to do it? I usually send an email with the link to the Zoom chat, but it's always the same link. But if you have a chance, maybe that's a good idea as a reminder. Thank you. Okay, so let's see what your answers are. So we have a majority. And the majority is in fact correct. The main thing to remember really is the very little part. Almost nothing changes. I also told you yesterday there is also a change in the interpretation of what wasn't permitted was forbidden, and now what's not forbidden is permitted. But these are really, really tiny little details. Basically, it's so little that you don't really need to care about these things for the purpose of the lecture. You really, really do not need to worry about this. The namespaces are also in 1.0. This is absolutely nothing to do with the version, right? And multiple top-level elements, that's also not a version of XML. Technically, if you have multiple top-level elements, it's just a fragment. It's not a document, right? That would be if you take a snapshot of a portion of an XML file, then that's called a fragment. But in an XML document, there is always exactly one top-level element, not 0, not 2, always 1. Okay. Then I have, what other questions do I have? This one. Which of these is not a well-formed entity reference? One of them you should recognize. Two others I might not have mentioned yet, even though that now you will learn what that is. And there is one of them that really doesn't exist. That would be not well formed. Yes, we have a majority. And the majority is correct. Indeed, this ampersand minus doesn't exist. Apos is the single quote. Remember, that's an apostrophe. There's 5 of them. Single quote, double quote, less than, greater than, and ampersand. Does anybody know what these ampersand sharp and ampersand sharp X things are? Can anybody guess? Yes, go ahead. So you're maybe the catch box. You're not far away in the sense that indeed that has to do with encoding a character. Maybe you can repeat your answer.
Yeah, did it work?
I think normally it should be activated. Somehow I have the feeling that the microphone, there is some sort of delay when you start speaking. It needs a few seconds for the sound to come. Go ahead.
So now?
I think go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say that in this situation, the first example probably relates to a conversion from ASCII to a specific character. I thought of new line, but it might be wrong.
Yeah. So basically, the most important part of your answer is correct, that these are indeed character encodings, right? This is really what it's about. The first one here with the sharp is in base 10. So these are actually digits. The other one, X, is in base 16. So actually, you can see that this is the same character. 32 is the same as 20 in base 16. Now, I don't know all the ASCII characters by heart, and I think that not many do. I think it might be the space. I think the 20, but I'm not 100% sure. So, but basically, this is encoding characters, right? That's the way, exactly like the \u in JSON. This is how you do it. All right. What you do not have, however, is plenty more that you have in HTML. For example, who knows the NBSP in HTML? Maybe some of you, to force a space, right? This doesn't exist in XML. Right, you have plenty more in HTML, but in XML, you really just have the 5 that I told you, and that's it. Okay. Let me also ask you this one. It's a taste question. Okay, I really like where the majority is going. This is exactly the spirit of what we are trying to teach, right? So this is my favorite. Now the other ones, I wouldn't say they're completely wrong because that's a matter of taste. In fact, if you want to start a troll on the internet, ask the question and you will see all the avalanche of emails and messages that are going to follow with people debating whether XML or JSON is better. But indeed, the way that I'd like you to think about it is that it depends on the use case, right? If you really have, we'll see that data frames are more compatible with JSON. We'll see that in 2 weeks. XML, if you want to argue with objective arguments, for anything related to publishing, when you have scientific papers and so on, where you have like really text that is annotated with tags and so on, here XML really has an advantage. But really in terms of data sets, the two are really equivalent. The verbosity, in fact, as we will see in 2 weeks, does not really matter. Because when you parse an XML document and it's in memory, you don't have anymore this syntax. All you have is a memory representation, and this is efficient. Okay, and the third one is also almost correct in the sense that both of them represent trees. We will also see, I make sure in 2 weeks, we start looking in the models and drawing the trees. But really XML and JSON in that regard are the same, is that these are for trees, collections of trees, and this is, as we would see, denormalized data. In the third one, it's the very easily that is not quite correct. You cannot very easily convert. There is a bit of non-trivial impedance mismatches between the two that you still need to fix when converting. Okay, when I come back to the slides. Okay, so this is where we were. We were studying namespaces, and I explained to you why we need the namespaces. It's exactly the same reason why in Java or C++ or Python, you need to actually organize your code separated in modules and in namespaces. An example was colliding element names. And so we saw that this is how you can actually declare a namespace and say that all the elements in an XML document are in that namespace. This is done with these XMLNS attributes that are not really attributes technically, because these are the reserved ones I told you about that start with XML. And this is in fact a namespace declaration. And here I'm re-showing to you what I showed yesterday. The idea is that this is a binding that says M is a shortcut to that namespace right there. And then you know that M here, you look it up right there. Then you know the local name is math. The namespace is taken from the bindings right there. The three together, prefix, local name, namespace together is called the QName, qualified name, right? And I also told you that if you change the prefix, it's exactly the same semantically. Doesn't change anything. Doesn't matter if you call it foo, bar, m, and so on. This here is exactly the same document, right? So that means that only the local name and the namespace really matter and not the prefix, right? So these two QNames here, oh, I realized the black is really not visible on dark blue. I will change that to a lighter font. But basically, I'm just saying that if you have two QNames with the same local name and namespace, but just the prefix is different, they compare as equal. Okay? So this here is the same. You see, all I did here was replace the prefix. This is the same documents. This is also the same documents. And all of these here are exactly the same. All the only thing that changes is really the prefix here. These are all the same. For whom is that clear? All right, it's an intuition to develop. Now, that last one here, I didn't say anything about. This one doesn't have any prefix. It just has this standalone XMLNS without any colons anywhere. This is called a default namespace. So that means that the prefix is absent, and you're saying that the absent prefix is bound to this namespace, right? So this is the XMLNS without anything. That's the default namespace. It means that anything that doesn't have any prefix in the entire document is in that namespace. It means that now this is the same document as this. I'm showing again. All I did was remove the prefix, and we have here a default namespace declaration. Now you might realize that this is actually much simpler, right, to have a default namespace. In particular, if you take a document that doesn't have any namespace and you want to turn it into a document to put everything in the namespace, all you need to do is add this XMLNS declaration right there, and your entire document will be in that namespace, right? So that's the easiest way. If you have a single namespace and everything is in there, just add this right there. All right?
There is
yes?
a question in the chat. Does the prefix declaration need to be in the top level element?
Yes and no. I'm going to explain why. For the purpose of the course, yes, it does. It's highly, 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 highly recommended that you only ever put your namespace declarations in the top level elements. So for the purpose of the course, yes, it must be in the top level elements. This is also common practice. A lot of people actually do this. If you don't, that's technically allowed. The problem is that it's very difficult to understand. Because then you have to deal with the fact a lot of complexity arises. Then you have only a portion of the document in which the namespace binding is in scope. Then you can have a portion in which a prefix is bound to a namespace, another part where it's bound to another namespace. Then you have the problem of overriding the namespace binding and so on. So you see, it's so complex and not really useful for the purpose of data sets. So this is to simplify things because it's already complicated enough the way it is. For the purpose of this lecture, and also in life in general, when you do data set, highly recommend the best practice of always putting them all in the top level elements. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I will also have slides on that. Okay. All right. So these are the same documents. It's just that here is the default namespace. This is not the same documents. In which namespace are the elements here?
The global one?
So that could have been a way to design it. So that would basically have been a default namespace, right? If you don't give a default namespace, that's a default namespace. So the design would have made sense. It could have been made that way. The XML working group actually decided in that case that it's in no namespace at all. So basically the namespace is absent. But from a design perspective, that would have been also good thinking, right? So no namespace. All right. So again, this is the same as this, and this is different because here there are no namespaces at all. Now, multiple namespaces is also possible. Again, just put them in the root elements right there. Bar and foo are the two prefixes, and then you can use the two prefixes foo and bar throughout the documents. So I highly recommend, again, it's probably for Switzerland, it's a very good thing. Alt ID, alphabetically sorted, even better if you want. And I even recommend that you keep across documents the same bindings. You can, of course, change the prefix, and the prefix is irrelevant. But if you change the prefix, it confuses the humans that are looking at your document. So this is why there's usually conventions that people use, that they are used to seeing the same prefix across documents, right? So you can have multiple namespaces. But of course, if people don't, be prepared, right? You need to understand that really the prefix doesn't actually matter, and you might see different prefixes across documents. Okay. So now, the default namespace should only be used, that's also a best practice, if everything is in the same namespace. You could technically mix it with other non-default namespaces. Again, it makes it too complex. So keep it simple, only use the default namespace if everything is in the same namespace. If you have more than one namespace, then use prefixes for all of them, all right? Okay, and again, I repeat a lot, there's not going to be a lot new today. I'm just consolidating what we've been doing. Yes?
There's a question in the chat. Can we have recursive namespaces? For example, some tags want to use inside, but they belong to a different namespace. Not the one that is in the top level.
So do you mean, can you override a namespace in a child element? Is that the question?
Probably, yes.
Yeah. So the answer is yes, you could do it. Maybe I have a slide. Yes, here. This is let me give you an example concretely. This technically would be allowed, right? You could, this would be well formed. You could have a declaration here, another here, another here. And you see here, we have a declaration for foo that we override here with a declaration for bar. Imagine you're a human being and you need to actually understand that this here, foo bar, is not the same as foo bar. Why? Because the prefix is not bound to the same namespace. You will get headaches with that. It's extraordinarily complicated to parse. So this is why, even though it's allowed and you can recursively define them and override them and so on, I really do not recommend doing that, right? Do you see, who sees that this is complex to read? Right, okay, very good. So I hope you appreciate that I facilitate your life by telling you all, put it all in the top level. All right. So here it's the default namespace. When there is none, it's no namespace at all. Here's a big summary of the 4 best practice architectures that you can have for an XML document. First, you could have no namespaces at all, right? That's absolutely fine, right? You don't have any namespaces. It's just like the default package in Java, or no namespaces in C++. You can do that. But of course, as soon as you release a library for other people to use, then namespaces are better because it gives it a name, right? But technically, you can have no namespaces at all. Second, you can have one default namespace just by adding this XMLNS declaration right there. Then everything, all the elements here will be in that default namespace. Third, right here, I don't see my screen here, you can have one prefixed namespace. This is fine too. And finally, you can have plenty of namespaces, alphabetically sorted even better. And then you use A, B, C, D. You see, you can use them all over the place. And again, if you put them in the top level elements, you don't even need to ask yourself, where are the namespaces visible? Because the answer is everywhere in the document, if you put them in the top level element, including here. Okay. Okay, so now I've already showed you that. Do not do that, even though it technically would be allowed. A word of warning is that I very carefully said when we had the default namespace here, all the elements are in that namespace. I didn't speak about the attributes because actually the attributes with no prefixes do not fall into that namespace. That's just something you need to know. That's part of the design. So unprefixed attributes are in no namespace at all, even if there is a default namespace. Okay. Now, question for you: can anybody see what is wrong on these documents? Yes, maybe we can throw the microphone. Oh, go ahead.
Namespace with two different prefixes.
Exactly, it's the same namespace, example.com/foo, bound to two prefixes foo and bar. This, in a sense, would be allowed. Do you see why it is a problem in the remainder of the documents to complete your answer? Do you see why it is problematic here? If you look at the foo bar element. Maybe you can try.
Two attributes with the same key.
Exactly, we have two attributes with the same key. Why? Because I said the prefix doesn't matter. Foo atre and bar atre, the two here. You see, here, this one here, and this one here, these are equal. These are exactly the same name. Why? Because the prefix is the same namespace. It's twice the same namespace. And I told you it's only the namespace and the local name that matter, not the prefix. So this is not okay. This is not allowed. This is not well formed. And it's forbidden because you have twice the same attributes in the same elements. We have a question over there. Maybe we can try to throw. I'm not sure it works, actually. I'm not sure why. Maybe you can try to speak closer to the, you can throw it then. Oh, over there. Oh, ooh. Well, I guess this is still experimental. You just need to put it back inside. It's really strange, okay? I will repeat what you say. So the local name is what is on the right of the column. This is the local name, right? This is atre is the local name. Atre is the local name. Bar and foo here are the prefixes. And you see that the two prefixes are all bound to the same namespace. So it means that here, you can view the local name as the first name and the namespace as the last name, right? So here we have the first name or the local name atre, and the last name, which is only a shortcut foo, the last name is example.com/foo. Here, the local name is also atre, and the namespace, the last name, is also example.com/foo. Right? Who sees this? Who doesn't? Okay. So I will let you digest this. But basically, again, the idea is that the prefixes are totally irrelevant and they are only shortcuts to the namespace. Okay?
There's a question follow-up. So if you have foo and bar for different URLs, does it work then?
Yes, it does. Yep, because then you have two different namespaces, and if the namespaces are different, then that's totally fine, right? Okay. Okay. So this is what I said. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, do we have time? What's the time? 9:39, we have time. I told you it would be slow today. I already threw enough complicated material yesterday, so today I'm really just consolidating. Can you find everything that's wrong in there? Because this is not well formed. So let's play this game. Try to find everything that is wrong. Yes, go ahead. Maybe yeah, let's try without microphone. We'll try to fix it and figure it out. So there is an XML element here. Yes, absolutely. This here is not fine. It's not that it's not well formed. It's just that you are not a member of the W3C, so you're not allowed to come up with your own XML element. So this is why that's not okay. Very good answer. Anything else? Yes? Kobola, yes, here. Oh, okay. So in fact, this is all okay. So the underscore, it's just like in Java or C++, you can actually start with an underscore. And here, this is actually also fine with single quotes. Remember that you can have double quote or single quoted attributes, but you need to escape then the single quote inside. This is not like JSON. In JSON, you would be correct that in JSON, you have to have the double quote, right? Okay, let's try again. Don't worry about wrong answers. We are here to learn. Yes, go ahead. Here, comment, yes. Here and here, absolutely, you are correct. Here, there is a collision. It's twice the same attributes, so that's not okay. This is not well formed. Yes, go ahead. Important. Yes, exactly. This you mean, right? Exactly. Here, yeah, indeed, this is not well formed because you have to escape this with lower than. I see also more raised hand in Zoom. Do we have anybody in Zoom?
Yes, one answer from the Zoom chat. The XML tags are case sensitive, so the movie is not the same. Like movie above and the movie down.
This one,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, this is correct. Indeed, here you have a uppercase M and here a lowercase m. So this is also incorrect. It is indeed case sensitive and it must correspond. Nothing else on Zoom?
And also mention that the movie is not closed.
Movie. Which one here?
Probably the uppercase one.
Oh, that's the same, exactly. You could either say it's because of the uppercase, or you could say here it's not closed and this is closing something that doesn't exist. So now let's come back to the room. You were raising your hand earlier. Maybe you wanted to say the same as somebody on Zoom. Okay, let's go back to you, yes? Let me try to find comments. Oh, I'm so close. Yes, here, right? So you're saying that there's the missing quotes, right? This is indeed correct. Here we are missing two quotes, either single or double. So this is also not well formed. Okay, yes, go ahead. Apostrophe. Can you guide my hand? Yeah. Here. Copy, yes. That doesn't exist in XML. You would have to define it, or in HTML it would be fine, but not in XML. Yes. Anything else? Yes, go ahead.
The comment format is not right. Before slash movie at the end.
Slash movie, yeah.
Yeah.
Here. Yes, indeed. Here you have a double dash, and this is also not all. This is a bit advanced, right? But indeed, you cannot have double dashes because it confuses the parser. This is also, I put it in the it's because of HTML box, right? Historical reasons. Anything else? Yes, this is a very good point too, and this is correct. This happens if you use Word, and actually some people do that mistake and then they look for a long time. If you have fancy quotes, that's not okay. You really need the ASCII quotes, right? Double or single. Very good catch. This one was tough. Yes? The third line on the top. Let me go back there. So here, on the top, yes, here. Oh, the encoding UTF-16. I think this exists. This is an alternative. So let me tell you about UTF-8. It's good that you mention it. UTF-8 and UTF-16 are both based on Unicode. It's the Unicode catalog, which is this huge list of numbers assigned to characters. UTF-8 basically is able to compress the most frequent characters, the ASCII ones, to just 8 bits. That's why it's called UTF-8. And it's going to expand to 16 or 24 or 32 bits if needed for the higher numbers. In UTF-16, you also use 16 bits for the ASCII characters, right? So it's more efficient if you have a lot of fancy characters, but less efficient if you have if you have ASCII characters. Okay, does it answer your question? Okay. All right, as you notice, I'm trying not to push my voice too much today. I think we are basically done. This you found, you found. This is all. Yeah, you found everything. Congratulations. And you can actually then put it. We'll use, actually, we have an agreement with the ETH licensing team that they purchased it for you. So I highly recommend you go to the ETH IT shop and download for free, it's covered by ETH, the Oxygen editor. You can actually create XML and JSON files in there. And it's going to fix all the mistakes for you. So in fact, if you go to Oxygen, it will underline in red what's wrong and you can fix it. Now it's all syntax highlighted. That's basically what it would look like if you actually try to fix it. Don't worry about this entity copy thing on the top. This is out of bounds for our material, just to show you that you can actually define your own if you want. But again, that's not in the material. Okay. So now we are done with XML and JSON. I would like to come back to the mapping to tables. Yes, go ahead.
What's actually inside the, like, if you're a format of the document, there is inside the links that you put when you define the namespace? Like, it's a list of
come back here. So your question is on this part, right? What are you allowed to put in there? It's good that you asked. Somebody also asked after the lecture yesterday, and I can say a few words. First, it does not need to be a website that you need to set up or anything. You can actually put pretty much anything you want. It's just the same that in Java, you can go ahead and create a package. You could even create a package ch.edhg and so on, even if you don't own the ETHZ domain, right? It's totally fine. There is absolutely no need for anything. What you see here would be exactly the same as com.example.foo as a Java package, right? So you don't need to create anything on a server. So it can really be anything that is a URI. HTTP is, many people use HTTP, but you have others. You have URN, you have mail to, FTP, HDFS, like you have plenty of others. But I don't think that anybody is really doing it because that wouldn't really make much sense, right? So typically what you put is in there is really almost always HTTP with a domain that preferably you own. Otherwise you can also take ETH's domain since you're students here. And then anything that basically would look like an address you can put in your browser, even if it's not a real address. Did I answer your question or yes? Awesome. Really, the main message is when you see example.com/foo, think com.example.foo in Java. This is really exactly the same thing and there is nothing more to it. Okay. Okay, now, the computer is deciding to upgrade Office somehow. Okay. So now let's come back to where we started. Because why are we doing all of this? Why are we looking on syntax, on JSON, XML, and so on? Like we will see in 2 weeks that these are trees. Because we denormalize. We want to be able to store data sets, even if they have nestedness, tables in tables and tables. And we want to be able to store data sets, even if they might have missing columns, additional columns, heterogeneous columns, and so on. So you see now, I hope it should be natural to you that if you take the first row in that table with phone 800, John 1, this is what it looks like in XML. You could say you use a sale element. It's typical to take the singular of the name of the table. So sale, and then product, price, customer, quantity, you see, mapped to the values that you just put in text. So you see, that should remind you of the way we did it with JSON. In JSON, we had an object with 4 keys, and these were the values. JSON distinguished between strings and integers. XML doesn't, just has text in the syntax, but this is it. For whom is this natural? That this row right here, is this XML here? Very good. Now, if you have 4 rows, what is typically done, again, it's a convention, is that you create an element with the plural form, sales, with an S, like the table, and then inside you have the singular sale, 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 but repeat it. It's totally fine to repeat in XML, and this actually is very often. So all the rows of your table would be children of the sales element like this. So this is how you can have multiple tuples. If you nest, so this here is an example where you have this table. Yes? This is also an excellent question. It's also the kind of question that starts a troll on the forums, like should I use an element or an attribute? There is no 100% correct answer to this because in some cases it's a matter of taste. Typically, the attributes are used when the data is relatively short. Like it's something that is metadata-like or something like this, right? So you put it in an attribute if the values are short. Elements are basically what allows you to nest. So you would have to use an element whenever it nests. Nevertheless, I think it's quite common in these cases. Most people would probably use elements rather than attributes. But again, if you put product, price, customer, and quantity as attributes in the sale element, this is also correct. You can absolutely do this as well, right? So this is really a matter of taste, and here it's really, I would say, a feeling kind of thing. Okay. All right. What do I want to show you here? Yes, the pretty print. I told you that you can actually nicely indent things and display it nicely for a human. This is much easier to read than this for a human, right? So this is what Oxygen can do for you too. It has a magic command. You just put XML that is poorly formatted and just click on clean indent, or I don't know exactly how it's called. I think it's Apple Shift P or something on a Mac. And it's going to magically add the indentation and so on that as a human being, you can read it. So you can also try this out. But this is the nesting, what I wanted to show you. How do you nest? Well, in JSON, it would be an array of objects. In XML, the way you nest is that you use this same pattern that you have the plural form here and the singular. Well, here you again have the plural form orders, and then you nest the singular order it there. We are not in the British Parliament, right? But sounds like it. Okay, so you nest the singular elements inside the plural elements. That's the equivalent of an array of objects. Okay, for whom is this clear that this is really the same representation? All right. So which one to use? Again, it's a matter of taste. People have different opinions. Some opinions are objective, such as when you have publishing things with text, XML is better suited. But for many use cases, they are really just the same. You could argue that XML is older and companies usually like XML because it has a lot of libraries and a lot of very large ecosystem that is enterprise ready. But JSON is catching up. So I would say the two cohabit. As computer scientists, you really need to be ready for both and anything else that could happen in the future. In fact, there are other syntaxes. This is YAML. It means yet another markup language. And I probably don't need to really tell you anything about it because I'm pretty sure you can figure it out yourself, right? What do we have here? Country, this is again like an object, a JSON object. Code name population would be like JSON keys. You see that we have strings, single quoted. We have numbers, you see the number right here. We have nestedness, we can nest objects in objects. We have arrays, you see, with these dashes right there. We can list things. This is YAML. And I hope you see that YAML and JSON kind of feel like the same thing. It's just a different flavor. But I'm pretty sure as an exercise, you could convert that to JSON very easily. You could also convert it to XML, even though with XML, it's going to be more involved. For example, you would probably have cities and then city Zurich, city Geneva, city Bern. That's how you do it in XML. Okay. So this is it for today. I hope there wasn't too much new, really. I just wanted to consolidate what we did yesterday. I will ask you the usual question to check that you followed. I want to say a few important things on that. Again, XML and JSON is what is available today. There will be others in the future, but if there's other syntaxes for trees, you will be ready for them, right? You will just learn the data model and so on. The other thing that I want to say is JSON and in particular XML are not perfect. They have a lot of complexity. What you need to understand is why people use them. And the reason why people use them is very simple, is because these are standards. And if you use a standard, first, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, because if you, for example, you're building software and you're looking for a format for your file, if you use XML or JSON, you can just download a library, a Maven dependency, for example, and you automatically get the parser and the whole ecosystem. So this is why, even though it's not perfect, a standard is always a compromise. You have 20 people sitting in the room with 21 opinions, and they converge to something. But really, what matters is these are standards. This is the most important aspect. In 2 weeks, we will look into the modeling, because as you can imagine, what I told you here is just the equivalent of CSV. But you know that in CSV, behind that, you have the relational model, you have SQL, you have relational databases. So for XML and JSON, we will also look at the model, the tree-like model, and we will also look at the entire stack that comes behind this, including the data frames that are very popular. We will see that, in fact, data frames can be seen as collections of valid JSON objects, but I'll keep that for in 2 weeks. Let me just give this before you go. Keep that for another time. There you go, just checking. All right, this looks good. So you see, today we took it easy and just wrapped things up. Thank you very much. I'll see you next week. We'll go into HBase, big table, white column stores. Enjoy the exercise session as well. Bye. Thank you.